It is great to be here in Etobicoke today to discuss something quite different than sports, and that is public transportation. And I want to thank Councillors Grimes and DiCiano for making it out to address this with me. They have been, both of them, champions of pushing forward waterfront transit, and they in fact brought the petition to council that resulted in the reset examination of transit along the waterfront being done, and it's presently something that is being done by our public servants. And I should also tell you that they have collected, as a means of supporting the message that I'm delivering today, a petition with thousands of signatures on it already that calls on the other governments to fund waterfront transit because of the obvious need that I'm going to refer to in the course of my remarks today, and I thank them very much for that ongoing support. I don't think it'll shock anyone when I say that I'm here today to talk about transit within the context of the upcoming Ontario budget. I want to be clear about this. I am not making noise ahead of the budget to attack anyone, to embarrass anyone, or to insert myself into the next election in any way. I am standing up for Toronto, and I'm trying to make it abundantly clear to the Ontario government that there is an opportunity available right now, a great opportunity for them and for this city. And it's available right now to build the transit we need for the future. Over the last 14 years, the Ontario government has invested extensively in transit in Toronto. We appreciate those investments, which came after years of a lack of investment. But the entire point of what I've been saying these past few weeks is this: transit funding and construction of new transit cannot and must not end with the list of investments that have been made to date. Those investments were the beginning of building up Toronto Transit to where it needed to be and must not be the end. And the opportunity comes from the new, consistent investment announced by the Trudeau government, an investment we all have a chance to multiply, including the province, if we step up now. We can take the money they have offered, which in many respects is new money, and it's money that's committed going forward, and multiply the impact of that money by having all levels of government participate in the transit projects that money is meant to support. One of the priority projects that we hope the province will join us in funding is waterfront transit. It is on our council-approved priority list given to the Government of Canada, coincident with their announcement of the fact they were going to have a Phase 2 funding for transit. Right now, the city is undertaking a reset of waterfront transit to craft transit solutions for the entire waterfront, from Long Branch right through the downtown core to Woodbine. As you can see around us today, our Etobicoke waterfront has exploded with development. This demonstrates confidence. People want to live here, but transit has not kept up. Simply put, we allow development to take place as a city without funding and building transit at the same time. The funding I'm seeking today is for the future, but it should have been committed in past years, which is why I feel a great sense of urgency. And that's just to properly serve the residents who live here today. When you look at projected growth in this part of the city in years to come, we know that the transit needs will be greater. There's going to be thousands more people living here in the next number of years, even beyond the people who live here today who are not properly served by transit. And that makes it very clear to me that we need to act now on waterfront transit. We need to build transit along the waterfront, and we need both the provincial and the federal governments to be our partner in building that transit. We saw in the federal government's budget this year that they are proving themselves as a great partner for Toronto. They know how important transit is to our cities and their citizens, and they are putting money forward to help us build high-priority council-approved transit for the future. To pay for our share of building transit along the waterfront, we offered up a plan. Our plan said yes to a fair, straightforward user fee on the Gardiner and the Parkway. The Government of Ontario said no to that council-endorsed plan, and I believe that shifts some of the funding onus back to them. Let me be clear again. This is not about commitments made by the Ontario Liberal government in the past, which I acknowledge, I appreciate, and they were desperately needed when they were made. But it's a new day, a time when we have an ongoing partner in the Government of Canada and a mayor who is saying, thanks in part to our past failure as a city to keep funding and keep building, a mayor who says our transit building job can never be declared done in a growing city. As long as this city continues to grow, which we all hope it will, then our transit building job can never be declared done based on the past list of investments made. If we don't collectively sign on the dotted line to fund and build the next group of priority transit projects, including transit on the waterfront, then we are simply repeating the mistakes of the past. Growth without proper transit and other infrastructure. My remarks today and in the past don't constitute any kind of an attack on the Government of Ontario. They represent an invitation to continue to be bold. They represent an invitation to continue to be bold, to help us chart the course for the next wave of crucially needed transit projects in a growing city. Even with the new partnership with the federal government, these kinds of projects like Waterfront Transit cannot proceed without the involvement of the province. I say that especially about the Relief Line. The Relief Line is a multi-billion-dollar project, and even with the money from the Government of Canada, the city cannot hope to undertake that project, the rest of it, by itself. And not proceeding with these projects that are on the priority list, the Scarborough East LRT, the Waterfront Transit, and the Downtown Relief Line, not proceeding with those would be a big mistake. A waterfront that isn't connected to reliable, high-level transit will be held back from residential growth and development and jobs, and will not have the quality of life we should have the right to expect in all of our neighborhoods. We cannot have thousands of residents who live minutes from our downtown shortchanged on transit. The time to keep funding and to commit to building is now, and I hope the upcoming Ontario budget reflects that reality. I'm happy to answer your questions on this matter or any other matter that you... Thank you, sir, and thank you for wearing that Leafs hat. You're already in shape for Blue and White Day. A little more blue clothing might sort of fill out the ensemble, but the hat's a good start. All right. Questions? Well, I think it is very important that we achieve a robust child care plan for the future. But again, it's going to be very dependent on the details that we get on commitments that have been made by both of the other governments. The federal government, in its budget, made a significant commitment to child care, but without much in the way of detail as to how that would find its way to the actual delivery of child care in a place like Toronto. The provincial government has made an announcement in much more macro terms of 100,000 new childcare spaces, but without any details as to what part of that they're going to fund. Are they just funding capital? Are they funding some capital and some operating and so on? So I would say that I want to see us move forward with a plan that is more robust than the plan we have at present. We made some significant investments in additional childcare this year in 2017 as a city by ourselves. But if we're going to do the job of having a more robust plan, we're going to need to know the details of those other two governments and their plans. And I'm very heartened by the fact they have plans, but they just haven't spelled out the details, and we'll await those, and then we'll know what it's going to be possible for us to do as a city. Well, I mean, this year, what the city ends up responsible for with respect to childcare is a direct byproduct of a partnership. And, of course, the partnership and what our share of that is depends on what the support is that comes from the other governments. We know the need is there, and I'm certainly convinced of the fact that the other two governments have a responsibility to help us meet that need in the biggest city in the country. But our ability to continue to invest, to complete all of the objectives of the plan that was developed at the city level is going to be dependent upon their support. I will say, this year, we stepped up and made a significant additional investment as a city by ourselves to enhance childcare, but it was a relatively small, contribution to the solution to a bigger problem, and we need to solve that bigger problem because this is a social program. We need the help and participation of the other two governments. I'll repeat something I've said many times. Property taxes were never intended to fund on their own social programs. And so our ability to achieve a much more robust child care program and child care strategy, which we need, will be dependent upon the other levels of government with access to the tax revenues they have, stepping up, as they've indicated they're going to do, and helping us achieve that goal. Well, it's a fairly easy question for me to answer because the council, the city council, has approved a list of priority transit projects. And I think, going from memory, it includes Smart Track, which is moving forward, and a lot of the funding elements are in place for that. It includes the Scarborough East LRT, which is on this list, and I've been talking about that, and we'll talk about that more later this week. It includes the Waterfront LRT, and it includes the relief line. And so the next wave of projects are those. I've indicated no aversion to having a discussion about a Yonge Street subway extension to the north, but I said it cannot possibly be even contemplated until we start to have some relief measures in place, including the relief line, to give the people on the existing transit system a degree of confidence that we're addressing things that are already known to us. So, it's being funded, as you know. There's some preliminary work being funded by the Ontario government on this Yonge Street North extension, as is the case with the relief line. But the notion that we would be proceeding ahead to have an enthusiastic look at a North Yonge extension before we get some idea as to how we're going to provide relief to existing commuters is just not something that I've been prepared to contemplate, and I've made that very clear. I'm not, I don't want to get into we've got into a council-approved priority list, and so I think that indicates something of what the council thinks is important for us to get done now. We have development here now. We have condo and apartment buildings and residences that are here now, and people living here now with inadequate transit. And by the way, schools and other things as well. That was something that all governments can't take much pride in, that we made the decisions to have all this investment happen, which is a sign of confidence in the city, without having the accompanying infrastructure. So I think we better catch up before we start looking at, things that in that case represent an extension into another municipality.
They thought that was a wise decision on behalf of their investors. And at that meeting, Hutchinson said that the mayor's office had bombarded him into supporting the subway, and that they have now defunded and backed away from that plan, so that they're supporting whatever solution provides some kind of investment to that area. Can you just comment on that and your involvement with that group and thoughts there?
Well, it's difficult for me to comment on a quote that I didn't hear him say with respect to, I know I've talked to Mr. Hutchinson many, many times, and he's been an enthusiastic supporter of the Scarborough Subway. And frankly, he was an enthusiastic supporter of the Scarborough Subway without any encouragement from me. I remember when I was a candidate for mayor, going out to the Scarborough Town Centre and campaigning out there and meeting the general manager who works for Mr. Hutchinson and hearing his absolutely unbridled enthusiasm for the Scarborough Subway, which is going to stop at the Scarborough Town Centre and is going to be, the Scarborough Town Centre will be a beneficiary of that, one hopes, in terms of connecting people up to retail. The notion that anybody bombarded anybody into doing anything is I think not really realistic. At the end of the day, I wish sometimes that I had more ability to persuade people to do things as mayor. I don't. It's a free country. People do what they wish. I would just say that one of the biggest beneficiaries of the Scarborough Subway and improved transit to Scarborough is going to be those who have existing investments in the Scarborough Civic Centre precinct, and it's going to bring a whole new wave of jobs and investment to Scarborough. It is going to be found 15, 20, 25 years from today to be one of the best investments this city ever made as a long-term investment to improve the quality of life for Scarborough residents and to improve their ability to attract the jobs and investment they need. I think the challenge for us has to be to accept, on the one hand, the fact that big cities have, expensive aspects to them, but at the same time to make sure that we never forget the fact that you have to make provision for affordable rental accommodation. You've heard me talk so much. One of the reasons I want provincial support for housing to accompany the federal money in the budget upcoming is so that we can expand the supply of affordable rental housing so that you can keep the city affordable, and that's one of the biggest expenses that people have is their housing. One of the reasons I want more public transportation is so that people can afford to get around in the city and not have to have a car. A lot of people, the expense of a car is a huge expense that they can't bear, or that they bear now when they really shouldn't be because they have to. And we've got to make it easier for them to get around, and there's all kinds of other benefits from that as well in terms of the environment and reduced traffic congestion and so on.